The fluorescent bulbs above buzzed, just on the edge of flickering, as I wheeled my prototype to the front of the studio. Outside, thunderstorms hung swollen and low over Curitiba. Inside, the tension in that cramped university lab was its own kind of pressure. Metal and wires glinted under the harsh light. My arms trembled from sleeplessness as I plugged the cable into the socket and switched on the robot's core. "Let's see what you have, Cassio," Professor Lawrence said. He rarely looked at me, only at my work, as if the two were separable. His tone was flat, almost distracted, but I knew how quickly it could turn sharp. I pressed the button and the joints whirred, a little too loud. My hands prickled, sweat gathering at my temples. Tinny motors moved the articulated arm, the pincers picked up the white ceramic mug from the table and gingerly, carefully turned it over and placed it on a coaster. I waited. A couple of students in the back laughed under their breath. "That's it," said Raphael, a voice dripping with derision. I said nothing and tried to slow my breath. "It's a mug flipper," someone else joked. A couple of uneasy snickers answered. Professor Lawrence stepped closer, scrutinizing the wires. "Explain to us, Cassio." He was not mocking, but the way his gaze slid down over the robot as if cataloging all it wasn't hurt more. I spoke, voice flat but steady. "It's a modular robotic gripper. The arm can be reprogrammed in under a minute to handle different objects, medications, small appliances. In the future, with better servos and sensors, it could assist risk-averse tasks, maybe in hospitals or for the elderly at home." Lawrence grunted. "And yet right now it's a mug flipper." He snapped his fingers. "You see the gap, yes?" He looked at me, as if searching for confirmation that I understood just how small I was. My mouth was dry. Someone coughed out a laugh. Even Deborah, who sometimes defended me, stared at her notes. After class, Lawrence's words still rang in my skull. "Real engineers solve real problems. Robots for mugs, who's paying for that?" Outside, the sky had cracked open and rain strafed the concrete. I wheeled my robot, now draped awkwardly in a tarp, through the parking lot, water soaking into my sneakers. I didn't have a car. My family had never owned one. I paid the bus fare with crumpled coins, sitting with my robot on my knees while the bus rattled through the glistening, potholed roads of Curitiba. When I got home, the apartment above Sorvit's Stories, the one with mildew threading the ceiling, my mother was sewing in the kitchen, humming a song from her childhood. Joe, my older brother, finished a set of push-ups in the cramped living room, then eyed me and my robot. "All her eye me," Joe snorted. "Cassio brought home R2-D2's ugly cousin." "Leave him alone, Joe," my mother said, but her voice was tired. Joe grinned, busy making robots to serve coffee, ear cute. "That'll pay the bills one day, sure." He went to shower, singing out of tune. I didn't have the heart to argue. I just wiped the rain from my robot's base, removed the damp tarp, and set it near the ironing board to dry. My mother touched my arm gently. "You hungry, Philho?" "It's not really me, I'll eat later." That night I tried to fix the noisy actuator. My father, home late from his shift at the bus depot, poked his head into my room. He shook his head with a sad half-smile when he saw my robot. "You're clever, Mufilho, maybe too clever, but maybe you should think practical. There are real jobs, at the factory or the depot with me. Bank jobs, evens." I forced a smile and nodded, but deep inside it strung. I soldered until midnight, letting the hum of the iron drown out voices that said this would never amount to anything. I took on work at parts shops to scavenge discarded electronics, fixed neighbors' TVs and microwaves. Each coin I earned bought me time and parts. The skepticism never stopped. At university, my professors wanted me to join a big project, a drone mapping software for real estate. Safe, predictable, I couldn't stomach the idea. My classmates grouped up, elbowing me out. I refused to quit the robot. Even my friends joked, good-natured but painful, that maybe one day robots like mine would fetch them a cold beer. The ridicule became a kind of silence around me. No one wanted to talk about robotics outside class. No one wanted me in their teams. One summer, after second year, Joe tossed me the job news section of the paper. "Another electronics store hiring. Even you could do checkout, bro, put down the toys." I said nothing. I gathered the pieces of my robot, which by then had grown from an awkward mug flipper to a multi-fingered arm with camera sensors. My hands shook, but I felt a truer kind of resolve. If everyone thought this was useless, then proving them wrong was the only way forward. The years after graduation were some of the loneliest in my life. I applied for dozens of engineering jobs, factories, machine shops, even municipal departments. Only 2 replies, teaching night classes at a technical school for a pittance and another at a supplier of fake AI gadgets who wanted me to assemble kits. I kept teaching, barely scraping by. I rented a windowless back room, working through the nights, trying to train the robot's vision code to recognize objects in messy home environments, not just the white-walled lab. My family reluctantly stopped asking about it. When I came for Sunday lunch, Joe would clap my back, still at the robot thing, Cass. His wife would laugh, ruffling my hair as if I were a hopeful child. For years, silence grew between me and Curitiba. The city changed. More apartments, more glass towers downtown, more traffic lacing its way around the tangled parks. I avoided people from my old life, ashamed of how little I had to show. There were times, lying on the hard, borrowed mattress, that I almost gave in. Sometimes I'd sit by the lake in the botanical garden, watching families picnic. I'd scribble code, sketch mechanisms in my weathered notebook, determined, in my own quiet way, to make something no one else believed in. There was only the resolve left, a deep, silent current I couldn't let go of. Late one spring, with barely enough to pay bills, I stumbled on a call for proposals from a research collective in São Paulo. They wanted home care robotics, real prototypes, urgent need, significant funding. I wrote the proposal in one fevered, sleepless week. By then, my robot could grip more than mugs. It could recognize dozens of household objects, safely manipulate fragile items, move with precise, soft motions. I sent the application with small hope, then tried to forget. 2 months later, a curt email arrived. Shortlisted, would I be able to demonstrate? I wired together my best prototype, packed my clothes in a plastic bag, and rode a bus overnight to São Paulo. The demonstration was in a plain co-working space, but the guests were not skeptical students. They were hospital directors, investors, real engineers. For once, people asked real questions. After 20 minutes, I stood there, blinking in disbelief as the lead researcher told me, "This is the most promising human-friendly gripper we've seen." They gave me a grant. For the first time, I had money to buy better servos, real cameras, materials not scavenged out of junk bins. I worked frenetically, sleep forgotten. The prototype became both more complex and more beautiful. Articulated, responsive, soft touch, designed for homes and hospitals both. Over the next 3 years, my robot was pilot tested in 2 hospitals in São Paulo and 1 in Rio. Elderly patients, laughing, watched as the machine delicately handed them medications or fetched a dropped TV remote. The doctors marveled. The newspapers came, a small article first, then a bigger one, and then, after a National Robotics Congress, my face on a magazine cover. Investors called. I built a team, 2 software engineers, a designer, and at last a small shared workshop, a proper space, not a windowless room. I returned less and less often to Curitiba. Some part of me feared seeing my family. I sent money home to help with repairs but didn't visit. My mother called, her voice thin and far. "You sound tired, Philho. Are you taking care of yourself?" I promised I was. Whenever the ache for home surfaced, I pushed it back with more work. It was only after our company's first full-scale manufacturing run that I felt ready. The largest hospital in Curitiba placed an order for 20 units of our robot. They invited me to demo the machines in a ceremony, local press, families, curious onlookers, hospital staff. The launch date was set. I would go home. The night before the event, I walked around the rain-glossed city, its jacarandas shedding purple petals on the sidewalk, the scent of earthiness and old dreams thick in the air. My old apartment above Soviet Stories now had a fresh coat of paint, but I still saw the ghost of my younger self in the windows. Joe met me at the door, more greyed at the edges now, with a football game playing low on his phone. My mother, slower than before but still smiling, embraced me as if I was 6 years old again. "Tomorrow's the big day, hein, Cass?" Joe asked over dinner. He tried to make it a joke, but underneath his voice was something I hadn't heard before, a cautious respect maybe, or the first hints of pride. "If you're not too embarrassed, you can come," I said, sitting up taller than I'd expected. Joe snorted, "Me embarrassed? PFF," but he glanced at his wife, who squeezed his hand. My father, older and thinner, watched me quietly. I lay awake late, listening to the familiar city noises, distant buses, neighbors laughing 2 floors below, the snap of rain on the roof. The next morning, I walked into the hospital foyer, heart pounding. The robots, now gleaming, compact, their designs softened and futuristic, were arrayed on a demonstration table. The press moved through the crowd, snapping busily. I saw children on tiptoes, hospital staff easily twice my age. My team wore new shirts with the company logo. They stood by with laptops, poised but nervous. My name was announced over the sound system. Cassio Brino, robotics engineer and native son of Curitiba. I stepped to the microphones. I had rehearsed, but all the words fluttered away. Instead, I said, when I started working on these robots in my childhood apartment, people thought I was wasting my time. But today, Curitiba is the first city in Brazil to bring this technology to its hospitals, all thanks to belief in machines but also in people. There was scattered applause, a polite, expectant silence. I pressed the demo button. The robot extended its arm, camera blinking, and gently retrieved a water bottle from the demonstration table. It spun, articulated, scanned the table, picked up a sealed medication cup, and delivered it perfectly held to a nurse who smiled, surprised at its steadiness. A girl in a wheelchair, maybe 8, wheeled closer. One of the robots gently took a crayon from the floor and handed it back. Her mother, tearing up, murmured softly, "Obrigada, Senor Robo." The press moved in, cameras clicking. The hospital director turned to me, beaming. "We are proud to have such innovation from Curitiba itself." I looked through the crowd and saw Joe. He had an uncertain, crooked smile on his face. My father hovered beside him, hands in his pockets. Where once I'd felt the heavy eyes of judgment from them, now there was only silence, a stunned pause of recognition. At that moment, I remembered the old apartment, the rusty iron, my mother's hands guiding fabric, the insults and laughter, the nights pressing code under a flickering bulb. They brought my family forward for a photo. Joe clapped my shoulder, this time with real force. "You did it, Cass," he murmured, eyes shining. "We were wrong, damn, I didn't think." My mother only hugged me, her face in my chest, tears dampening my shirt. The crowd filed past, nurses, patients, strangers, each one either thanking me or silently marveling. The skepticism that had built a fortress between me and my hometown was gone, replaced by a fragile new respect. As the event ended, the director gestured to a window overlooking the city. Evening sun filtered through, turning the streets gold and long-shadowed. "You could move back here, you know," he said quietly, "if you ever tire of São Paulo. Curitiba is proud of its own, finally." I gazed over the sprawl of rooftops, the glint of buses threading through the city, the shadows of the jacaranda trees on grey pavement. That night, as we gathered for dinner in the small apartment, I realized my definition of home had changed. Acceptance hadn't arrived in applause or headlines, but in that deep, encompassing silence. The end of Mockery, the slow, astonished shift to pride. The silence, once painful, was now peace. I knew in my bones that the real work was still ahead, but I belonged here as much as anywhere, and I was ready to start again, this time not alone.